You're listening to Infinite TBR, the podcast where we try not to buy more books. I'm Smack.
And I'm Gabi. Spoiler alert, we're going to avoid major spoilers, and when we can, warn when we're going to discuss a particular book in detail so you can avoid that part of the episode. You can also check the show notes for time-stamped flags identifying potential spoilers.
You can visit our website at infiniteTBR.com to see each episode's show notes, and you can also find us on Twitter at InfiniteTBR, where we live tweet our reading experiences sometimes.
Last time, as we mentioned, we went off on a kind of Six of Crows tangent without
A significant and substantial
tangent about Crooked Kingdom, actually, and then realized we didn't, explain anything about Six of Crows, including any of the names we dropped.
Or even who would buy? We didn't
do
anything, basically.
So, we're going to, but we saved that content, both for that, because we talked a lot about that one, and then we also talked a lot about one of your favorite reads from that month, which was A Dowry of Blood by S.T. Gibson, and we're going to insert that content here in addition to a few little supplemental tidbits, and then we're going to go into some follow-up information about the books we were reading at the time, and it just started.
Checking in, if you will.
So, Six of Crows by Leigh Bardugo is basically about a found family. It's
a heist or a found family with a heist.
Yes, a found family with a heist, or a heist by a found family.
It's very much like a bunch of underdogs. Mm-hmm. Nobody likes each other.
In fantasy Netherland, we should say this is a fantasy duology.
Fantasy version of the Netherlands.
Yes.
Yeah. And then they go off to the fantasy version of, Norway or
Finland
Iceland
or
something really cold. Mm-hmm. And they do their heist.
They heist
so hard.
All day.
And, everybody comes together and it's all really wonderful. And then it ends on a bit of a cliffhanger, just to keep you primed for the
eat the rich. You really come off of Six of Crows just ready to just eat the rich.
Yup. The sequel is called Crooked Kingdom, and it's more a series of heists because the found family has already come together. They are supporting each other, but they have to deal with everything that they put off dealing with in Six of Crows.
Yes. Plus all the new stuff that cropped up at the end of Six of Crows. There's just a lot to deal with.
It is kind of a long book, but it doesn't feel like that.
No, it does not.
It's really exciting.
It's really just incredible.
Yeah.
And our cast, our lovely cast, includes Kaz, who is the ringleader.
Right.
And his specialty is thievery.
Prodigy criminal mastermind.
He is a baby. They're all murder babies.
Because they're all 16.
Yeah, they're all 16.
17.
17, 18.
I think Matthias might be 18. But yeah, it's YA.
It's YA.
So everybody's a teenager.
And
which makes them all prodigies.
Yes, exactly. Who all find each other.
Right.
So he's OG traumatized murder baby.
Yeah.
Has a lot of
ridiculous backstory.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
And then there's Inej, who they call the Wraith. She started...
And the spider.
Yes. A spider is her job title.
Yes.
But she was trained as an acrobat and has turned that into being a thief, specifically of secrets. Mm-hmm. She goes in and breaks into secure houses of rich people and then collects blackmail.
Yes. For Kaz. And the criminal gang there Kaz works for.
Yeah. They're part of a street gang.
Mm-hmm.
Who else? There's Nina, who is from the fantasy version of Russia.
Raqqa.
That just finished a civil war. And so she...
which you can read about in the Shadow of Bone trilogy. Also.
Or you could skip that. Just read Six of Crows. And so she is what they call a heart render, which means she has magic that relates to bodies, but not in a healing kind of way.
I mean, it can be in a healing kind
There
of
are
way.
healers and heart renders.
I mean, same
And
powers,
yes.
different utility.
So, like, in the Six of Crows, it becomes a little more clear that there is like more overlap than you learn in the original trilogy.
Yes.
But she's a badass. She's
great.
also like canonically fat. She's a big girl, and it's never like it's good fat rep basically.
Yes.
And then there's Matthias, who is complicated.
Yes, he is. Our favorite ex-Nazi,
Yes.
Matthias, is from Fierda, which is the
place they
cold
go to
place.
steal
Yeah.
stuff.
Which is one of the reasons they bring him into the gang, because he
Right.
supposedly has all this inside knowledge.
And he's a big old grumpy bigot
But
who gets over himself.
yes, once he and Nina kind of have it out, because Nina landed him in
Prison?
Kirch prison,
Sort of. Not by accident, but like
yeah, there are reasons,
Yeah.
and they have to deal with that. But
Capital-
also they're in love, and they're dealing with that.
right.
You know,
And they're
enemies.
teenagers.
Yeah, and they're teenagers, so they're dealing with that.
Who else? There's Jesper.
Oh, Jesper,
Who is also in the street gang with Kaz and Inej. And
He's a sharpshooter.
He's a sharpshooter, gambler, addict.
Mm-hmm.
And Wylan. Wylan is interesting because in the first book, in Six of Crows,
You get very like tiny snippets.
he's
as you go
not
along.
he doesn't have his own narrating chapters in Six of Crows, but he does in Crooked Kingdom.
Yeah.
And
So you don't get a complete picture of him really until the end of Six of
Right.
Crows, and not because you get anything from his point of view.
right. But he's sort of
The baby.
he is a baby. He's not a very hardened criminal,
No.
especially compared to the rest of them.
He's the son of the merchant who hired them to pull off this heist in Six of
Right.
Crows.
And
He's
so
supposedly their leverage.
yeah, he's supposed to be like their ransom if the guy who hired them
Flicks.
tries not to pay up at the end of it. But of course that goes horribly wrong.
Sure it does.
Everything in
Everything in those books goes wrong.
goes horribly wrong in the best ways.
Mhm. So that's our... And in Crooked Kingdom we also have
How do we describe him without being spoiler? There's a seventh semi-important character in Crooked Kingdom who we meet toward the end of Six of Crows.
Yes.
That's good and neutral.
That's good, yeah. It's really all you really need to know
Yeah,
about
that is
him
really
anyway.
all you need to know about Six of Crows.
Yeah. So
Enjoy.
here is where we're going to insert... but actually before I do that, I am going to say my favorite passage, I think, from either book. I don't remember which one it was. From Crooked Kingdom. My favorite passage is when Inej is going face to face with Dunyasha, who's this, like, basically Inej's evil foil, who's kind of sent to deal with Inej specifically. So she's kind of like a badass assassin, and
I really liked her. She was an awful, horrible person, and I hated her because she put darling Inej in danger. But, like, I really liked that she was positioned as if, like, sort of as a chosen one.
Yes. So I thought that Dunyasha was going to... I don't remember if we talked about this, but I thought Dunyasha was going to be far more significant, especially, like, I thought they were setting her up to be a huge player in later.
Everybody thought she was a chosen one.
Yeah. And at first she seems like someone who you might be able to turn to the good side, because she just seems like a bored assassin. Like, give her a reason to get more interested in your side. Like,
Yeah.
But then she really turns out to be kind of like a, not a cultist, but someone who's just like, has her...
An extremist.
Yes, an extremist, thank you.
Yeah.
So she has a very extreme points of view on her
and
path.
she's incredibly set in her ways, and there's nothing that shakes her from that.
Yes.
And to be like the first person narrator of a chosen one story, like, there has to be something that shakes the main character from their static lives.
Right.
And that, I think, is what makes her such a small character compared to how the rest of the entire genre would set her up.
Right.
Which I thought that was really interesting.
Yes.
So, your favorite passage.
So my favorite passage is they're facing off, and Dunyasha is saying, like, you know, you're worthless, you don't have the same principles, so we're just, like, not even on the same level. And Inej almost felt sorry for her. Dunyasha really believed she was the Lantsov heir, and maybe she was, but wasn't that what every girl dreamed? That she'd wake and find herself a princess, or blessed with magical powers and a grand destiny. Maybe there were people who lived those lives. Maybe this girl was one of them. But what about the rest of us? What about the nobodies and the nothings, the invisible girls? We learned to hold our heads as if we wear crowns. We learned to wring magic from the ordinary. That was how you survived when you weren't chosen, when there was no royal blood in your veins. When the world owed you nothing, you demanded something of it anyway. And I thought that was probably one of the best passages in
the whole book.
The whole
650 page book.
I was just, it resonated a lot with me. I remember tearing up.
And it really encapsulated the entire, like, Six of Crows gang.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
And
that's their whole vibe.
It put the whole duology in such a stark contrast to Bardugo's first trilogy, which is very much like Chosen One, almost a Mary Sue, goes on an adventure, saves the kingdom, saves the world.
Spoil? I'm just kidding. Like, come on, how else is
I thought you were going to call her spoiled, and I was like,
nope, nope, spoilers.
Yeah,
she saved the world, guys.
Do you know what like, offhand, the one passage I do really remember is on, like, page 30 of Six of Crows. It's the very beginning.
Offhand, let me just whip out a page number.
Page 30-ish.
30-ish.
Because it was so striking. And so, like, you get the prologue, like, something fishy's going on in a rich guy's house, and it's a point of view that we never hear from again.
No,
just this, like, random guardsman.
Immediately.
And yeah, like, shit's going down, and it's interesting, it's new, and then we meet the Crows, and they go off on an evening peace talk, I guess, with another gang.
Oh, right.
And it's from Inej's point of view, and she's hanging around in the buildings around this square on the rooftop, trying to keep an eye on her people and keep any, like, last-minute assassins from showing up. And the dialogue is fun. It's, like, snappy and witty. And then the mood changes where Kaz, like, whips out this, like, blackmail he's got that nobody really expected. And suddenly the guys on the other street gang who had been, like, joking around with him, like, fall silent. And there's this line that's like, the kid was gone and Dirty Hands had come to play.
Yeah.
And I was like, oh, well, this is why people like these books. Okay. But, like, that was the moment I got caught in the book.
Yep.
And I was like, nope, not stopping.
That is, yeah, that was a great moment where you get, like, this is what these books are gonna be like.
Yep.
The whole time.
And I don't get that crystal clear moment with very many other books. Like, you enjoy them or you don't, and they're good or they're not, but, like, that one, like, the first 30 pages are fine. It's mediocre.
Yeah.
And then you get that moment and buckle up.
So I think this is the point, for real, where we'll put in the whatever we rabbled out about last time.
We have a lot of thoughts.
Yes. Yeah, because I recently finished reading Crooked Kingdom.
Like 2 days ago, right?
Yep. Very, very
What did
recently,
you think?
very, very fresh. They were so good.
They were so good.
I'm like, how much do I want to talk about? Because the main thing I wanted to talk about is a major spoiler. But I can always flag it if we want to talk about it. But general notes. I mean, I love me a heist, a well done heist.
And this is well done.
So well done. And, like, it was, she did a really good job making, like, having the kind of multiple nested heists.
Yeah.
And then, like, letting so many of them go wrong. Like, eventually you figured out, like, if it was a heist early on in the book, something was gonna go wrong, and they'd have to like fight back.
Yeah.
And then Crooked Kingdom. So I've kind of like Six of Crows. Like you kind of get that pattern overall. And then in Crooked Kingdom, I was like, okay, that's the pattern. Like, whatever they plan here at the very beginning, like, something's going to go wrong. They're going to have to, like, retcon it. It'll be fine. So I was like, I fully expected the first plan to go wrong. And then they started setting up the second plan. And it was, like, only, 200 pages in? Like, there was still well over half the book.
This is, like, a 500,
and I was
600
like,
page book.
There's not time for this one to go well. And I knew, okay, so this is where I may want to insert a spoiler warning. Hey everybody, this is Gabi coming at you from the future to let you know that the spoilery in-depth discussion of Six of Crows and Crooked Kingdom starts about here and lasts until about the 30-minute and 40-second mark. So if you want to skip ahead, now's the time to do that. Future Gabi out. I knew going into Crooked Kingdom, I was 90% convinced someone was going to die. One of these 6 characters was and I was like, there's only, I think I honestly landed, there's only one person it could be, and I could walk away from the duology like, okay. Like, not happy, okay, but like,
Nazi.
Yes, our favorite ex-Nazi.
Jesus. Do you know how I figured out somebody was going to die? Because when things started to go really well for Nina, and they were like, yes, come back to Ravka, we'll reinstate you, you can do whatever, and then Matthias and her like, well, maybe we could go back to the Nordic kingdom and like save people from their bigotry. And then I was like, there's no way that's going to happen. She's going back to Ravka because they're going to need cool heartrenders for the next duology.
Oh, so you kind of knew that Nina was going to be involved in the next.
I mean, like, how could she not? She's the coolest Ravkan there is.
Yes.
Aside from...
So I didn't realize... I did not realize that anyone from Six of Crows was going to end up in King of Scars, etc.
I don't know for sure, but I am pretty dang sure.
Right. And then... that was actually the opposite of a red flag for me. Because at one point I was trying to figure out, I was trying to brace myself. I was like, okay, who could it be? And I thought the most likely culprit was Kaz. Because I was like, I was trying to parse out, like, who had a goal after the heist? And everyone, who had a purpose once everything was done? And I was like, they can't kill off Jesper because he's got his dad and he has to live happily ever after with Rylan. Right. Like, you can't kill either one of those two boys because
they're safe.
They're safe.
They're too cute to be dead.
You can't kill either one of them without starting a fan riot. I'm sorry. And then I was like, well, and Inej has two, like Inej was a possibility, right. But then I was like, you can't kill Inej because that would wreck Kaz, and then, and he would never recover.
Right.
Fully would never recover from that, ever. So there's no way to give Kaz closure if Inej dies. So I ruled out Inej. Mm-hmm. And then I was like, and then when Nina and Matthias were like, we have a plan. And I was like, well, now you can't kill either of them, because what are either of them going to do without the other? Like, and I was like, Matthias has to go back to Fjerda and find his wolf, and they're going to, like, figure out their nonsense, and then they're going to, like, do their, and they had to go rescue, or they have to, like, go retcon a bunch of other Nazis. De-brainwash them. And I was like, they have a purpose, and if they get rid of either one of them, it kind of ruins this whole arc that Matthias had.
The second they had a dual purpose, I was like, it's not good. Nope.
So I was like, it's gonna be Kaz. And then, because I was like, everyone else. But then, I was like, but it would be weird to see how everyone else, I don't know. I could see everyone being like, more in Kaz, and then move on with their happy lives.
Yeah, like eventually.
But then it would also be
like
a
big fan riot if Kaz died,
yeah, that's true.
Actually.
But he also, like, he had no purpose beyond his revenge. So it was like, what?
And they sort of, like, slid in a purpose,
very
the
last minute.
20 pages.
So I was like, how, like, once this is over, what are you gonna do? Like, there's nothing for him to do, and they kept preventing him from having a purpose, and preventing him from having purpose. And I was like, so I was very convinced Kaz was the one who was going to eat it. And then the whole Matthias. And honestly, even after Matthias died, I kept waiting for someone else to die. I was
oh
like,
my god.
and literally up to the very end, I was like, who's gonna suddenly shoot him out of nowhere? I was like very stressed out at that point. Could not come down from my. I mean, that was in the middle of my like Marina post-surgery stress too. So like I was
so
already operating from like a very high baseline level of stress. But and then I was a little surprised with how they did his, because like obviously emotional impact. Like yes, okay. At that point, you love the dude. And you want to see him...
And he's really redeemed himself by that point.
And you want to see him flourish from this new point in his life, even though he's, like, clearly found a sense of, like, self... Like, not complete self-acceptance, but he's clearly, like, I'm learning, like, I'm growing, like, I'm comfortable with who I am now.
Yeah.
I just have to keep catching these subconscious thoughts I have, but, like, I'm comfortable with who I am becoming.
Right.
And I'm excited about the idea of helping other people
grow into that
same direction. Yeah. And then to have the first opportunity he has to even like try that, and
they kill him.
Yeah. I felt like in a way it almost like undercut that whole goal, and
I don't know.
It makes me wonder how they're even going to move forward and accomplish that.
The moment I knew that Nina and Matthias would be happy together, and when I still suspected that Nina would show up in later books,
right.
Like you can't, like, female characters don't get to be both happy and have like a purpose.
Aww.
So like, we had to break her heart to send her back to Ravka to like do whatever they're gonna do in the next 2 books.
So that was
really
my
upsetting.
Yeah. It was very upsetting. So that's like the main thing. That's like the freshest, the still open wound.
Tell me what you thought about.
You
said something about their like plague protocols.
Oh yeah, so like one of the ways they execute the final heist is to like set off plague protocols, and then there was
plague protocols.
Yes,
okay,
and then there was a passage where they talk about how the city locks down as soon as that plague alarm goes off, and like everyone like goes to their homes. And, like, commerce shuts down, traders shut down, all, like, traffic going out of the city, like everyone, just, like, everyone's so scared.
Island just locks down.
And not only is the government effective at executing this lockdown, everyone is very, very willing to go hide in their houses for the duration. Like, they're scared to death of this thing.
So this is a commentary on our life.
Yes, I was like, this is a very capitalistic...
True.
City / like Ketterdam is the city.
True. There was no attempt at price gouging.
And like, there's no way that insane immoralistic country that like literally has a god devoted to pretty much commerce and capitalism. Yep. They have a god of capitalism and a church in the shape of a hand. And you're telling me
that they don't have Facebook.
They don't. It's true. They don't have fake news. I guess. So,
okay.
And then there was like a paragraph about that, and I was like, I believed this right up until. But now I just don't believe it.
All sense of realism is gone.
Those were my plague thoughts. Cannot believe also that Kaz walked into a morgue.
Yeah, that was.
I was like
pretty ballsy.
My dude, you have so much trouble just, like, existing next to Inej, and then, like, willingly... You didn't even have to be there. I think he picked the lock on the door, and then was like, yes, Nina, who can now raise dead bodies, I want to be with you for this part.
That's a good point. I don't think I thought of that.
I mean, they don't really go into... Like, he has his hesitation at the entrance. Right. He's like, and he steals himself what they're about to do, and then they cut to black because they can't give away, like, what's gonna happen. Even though, like, Nina's here and she can raise dead bodies, like, how many places could this possibly be going? But, so then I was like, so then you know, like, Nina's gonna be raising some dead bodies, and then I was like, Kaz, my beautiful boy Kaz. Why are you doing this to yourself? My little murder child. They're all my precious murder children. And then I think the only major gripe I had, like, those are all, like, funny gripes I had. Yes. Like, they didn't really take me out of the story or anything. I was just, felt for my murder babies and laughed at our own country, but the only problem I had was how they treated Kaz's touch repulsion thing, especially in the first book. That was...
The first book I could almost excuse it because nobody really understood.
So, yes.
And part of that was that we, the reader, didn't understand. Like, we get his backstory really late in the book.
So, not before the iffiness starts. We get the story, and then, like, Inej starts delivering her ultimatums about, like, we can't be together unless, like, you can handle touching me. And I was like, let's talk about asexuality and have an open and frank discussion about, like...
Touch aversion.
And if, like, I can see, like, having that discussion and being like, okay, we're clearly looking for something different in a physical relationship.
Right, but there was no discussion.
There's no discussion. No clear, healthy relationship communication about sexual boundaries or anything, and, like, what they expect to get from each other out of a more intimate relationship. It was just...
ultimatums.
Can you touch me? Can you touch me? Oh no? Then I guess we're not gonna do this. And then, like, you know, and I guess, like, it's not like Kaz ever explained, but he shouldn't have to, is kind of my thing. He should not have to explain a reason behind a touch aversion to, like, have that boundary respected. But I could see, like...
From her point of view, this is not to play devil's advocate, but because he is so shit at communicating...
Oh, yeah.
That, like...
Dude's terrible.
Like, I don't think it ever occurred to her that, like...
So that almost made it worse for me, because there were, at least from the point of view of the author, because there's so many reasons to fall back on why Inej can be like, you're gonna have to, like...
Work on
some shit before we can even think about having a proper relationship.
No, you're right.
Like,
because she goes straight to an ultimatum.
Yeah, like they never even talk about whether they'd be interested.
Anything.
They don't talk about anything, but like literally jump from we have a strictly professional relationship and you're just my worker to if you don't want to touch me, then we can never be together. And Kaz being like. I just want you to be my spider anyway. It's just like, wow. But she didn't, like, so that point blank ultimatum didn't come up in the second book, so it was a little bit easier to be like, okay. And I know that that was clearly intended to be like a metaphor for how emotionally unavailable Kaz is. And that he does need to work on his shit before.
The metaphor works better than the non-communication.
Yes. Yes. So, anyway, so that was my biggest gripe.
I really loved the beginning, the first, 100 pages of Crooked Kingdom.
Yeah.
Where Inej, realizes, where they're torturing her, and she screams, if you break my legs, he'll never want...
Yep.
What was it, he'll never want me back?
Yeah,
I'll be of no use to him. Yeah. That was
good.
gut-wrenching.
Yeah.
That was really good.
Oh.
That was excellent.
She was really good at, the characterizations were just...
They're amazing.
So great.
I don't know of too many, I don't want to say any other, because I'm sure there are, but of many other authors who can juggle such big casts. It's so much work.
And easily tell, who you're reading from at any given time.
It says at the beginning of every chapter, but, a lot of them you don't have to look. You just know who they are.
Yep.
And, I really liked, you could see it, Bardugo starting to develop that skill in the Shadow and Bone trilogy, where in the third one, the whole, gang escapes from the underground caverns, and they go on this sort of quest for the Firebird together, and there are, 9 people there.
Yes, once she started getting more people involved in the gang, that's when you started being like, oh, maybe she can be a good writer.
Yeah. And she went for, she scaled it down for Six of Crows, and, she really, from 9 to...
Yeah.
And she just does casts just so well. I'm just in awe.
So much better when you're just out of the main character's head.
But
Shadow and Bone.
There's a reason there's so many books, though, with, first-person point of view. Because, it's so much easier to,
one of my writing teachers once said that, like, in first person you can sort of put your arm around the reader and, like, whisper all the important stuff, because, like, you don't have to say it out loud.
Right.
Like, this is what they're thinking, this is what they're familiar with. So I think of that a lot, but, like, you can't do that with 6 characters.
No.
With 6 main characters.
It's very funny that she did that so much
I
better
know.
than from first person.
I think that was just the most common way to write a YA book back then. The early,
Sure.
2012?
Yeah, I can cut her some slack. It was her first.
It was her first book. First trilogy.
Yes, all of the above. So that was what we thought about from last time.
Yeah.
So now we're going to go into one of your top reads at the time, which was, I think like I already said, is Dowry of Blood by S.T. Gibson.
Most of what I had to say involved a lot of spoilers, so we will mark that in the show notes, as well as like a, hey, we're going to start our spoilers now.
Right.
Ditch us if you need to.
I was absolutely surprised by how much I liked A Dowry of Blood, and it's by S.T. Gibson, and it was billed to me as Dracula's wives band together to kill him.
Good.
Yes.
Get him.
Get him. And that's what it is. One of his wives is actually a guy.
Delivered.
But it's this really interesting, like, what's it called? Polycule?
Mm-hmm.
And the 3 spouses, shall we call them, it's the dynamic between them and Dracula, who is never once named. The whole thing is constructed as a sort of a purging journal entry by the oldest of his wives.
Interesting.
And she says at the beginning, I will never say your name again. You are going to die forgotten.
Ooh.
Yeah. And stuff like, I didn't start out on this road intending for your blood to just drench my nightgown, but that's where we ended up.
Oh well.
Yeah, it's a book about domestic abuse, basically.
Sure.
And so, like, it starts where she is, like, a Romanian peasant whose village has been raided. She's lying in the ground, dying. She watched her father be burned alive. They beat her brother and mother till they died, type thing. And then this, like, dark prince comes along and saves her and takes her to a castle, and everything's really fancy, even though there are no other servants. And then he becomes her whole life for at least a century, and they're just there together. And her entire life is about being in love with him and serving him. And
Gross.
I mean, like, yes, but also, like, her naivety is just, like, they're clearly monsters, and they kill people quite often,
Sure.
and it's terrible and bloody and whatever, and she's still really religious, which is an interesting dynamic. But, like, then the plague comes.
Another plague book.
I know, there's another plague. And then this one, you can tell that, like, the author went back and wrote this, like, section of, like, what it's like to be in a plague. Like, plagues eat time, you're trapped in your house, and time passes, and you don't really feel it pass until you leave your house again, type thing.
Sounds familiar.
I know, it's really, really beautiful writing. But, like, I read that and
Ooh. there.
It felt so familiar that, like, I could just tell she went back and wrote it then. Or they. I don't know what the pronouns are.
Yes, yeah.
But the whole book is really beautifully written. And it's basically the story of this woman who, it's a domestic abuse story, and as she goes through life with her, I'm just gonna call him Dracula. She goes.
Don't speak his name.
I know, I feel kind of bad. But, like,
she worked so hard to excise his name from history, and you done messed. I'm just kidding. Oh
So, like...
Hey, this is future Gabi again. We do go into some in-depth plot points from A Dowry of Blood from about here to the 43-minute, 45-second mark. So if you don't want that experience ruined for you, now is the time to fast forward.
They leave the abandoned castle in Romania. They go to Vienna, and she talks about how much she loves the city, and she loves to just be out there at night and go to plays and theater, and she has this friend who comes over and does embroidery with her, and then he finds out she has a friend who comes over and does embroidery with her, and they have a very uncomfortable conversation about it, and basically she sends her friend away and never talks to her again for her own safety, but both of their safeties. But like it takes it's hard to tell like how much time is passing because she's not really paying a ton of attention to it. And like she says at the beginning, like, I wish I'd known what year it was when we started all this, but like she just doesn't. Sometime it feels like it's about 100, maybe 200 years before the bubonic plague hits Eastern Europe, whenever that might be. Okay. But like she loves cities, she just, and then I don't know.
I mean, if I were trapped in a castle for 100 years, I too would like cities.
Yeah, right. And she only feeds on wrongdoers. So she like
good vibe.
Tracks down like corrupt politicians or wife beaters or gangsters or like just bad guys, and those are the ones she terrorizes and eats. And Dracula makes so much fun of her for it. He's like, you're still a monster too. I'm a monster, you're a monster. Just because you're getting rid of all these human monsters doesn't mean you're a good person. And like there's some, the first time or two he says it, there's some echo of like him wanting to actually warn her, but it's hard to tell like how much of it
feels
is
very emotionally manipulative.
Everything he does is so manipulative. She ends up
such a red flag.
Vienna ends up being like under siege or like attacked or something, and so they flee the city and they go to Spain, where they are taken in by this Contessa, I guess, minor noblewoman, and it turns out that Dracula has been having a like letter exchange. I can't even remember what it's called. It's so late. I'm tired. They've been exchanging letters for at least 5 years. Okay. Very intimate letters where he told this Spanish noblewoman who he is, how old he is, all about the protagonist, like their lives, like trying to like bring her into the fold, basically. So they get to this woman's palace, and the narrator is like, "What the fuck?" and he absolutely coerces her, and he says at one point, "Do I have your permission to turn her?" But it's not like she can say no. Right. Like, he has set it up so she cannot say no. And so, like, that feeling like he did technically ask for permission, and how absolutely turned on she is by this woman. This whole book is just incredible. Sex and blood and manipulation. It is wild. And so, like, another couple hundred years go by. She and this woman are, like, they call each other sisters. They, you know, like, shield each other from him. And they develop their own, like, ways of placating him.
Signs of a healthy relationship.
Absolutely. And one of the scenes in their life that the narrator picks out is when one night he's too busy with his, like, his own thing going on. He does research into the differences between vampires and humans, and that's how he passes the years. But he's so into his research one night in Venice that he lets them go out on their own. Like that's not allowed otherwise. And so they go to the opera, and it's Judith and I don't know. It's a Bible story. She cuts off his head. She marries.
I was raised Catholic, and I have no idea what you're talking about.
Judith of Holofernes. There's a really fantastic painting by Artemisia Bernaleschi. No, not Bernaleschi. There's a really famous woman painter from the Italian Renaissance who does these really... Gentileschi. Artemisia Gentileschi. And she does these really, like, contrasting shadows and light. And one of her most famous paintings is Judith of Holofernes, where Judith marries some guy who's out to destroy the Israelites, and then he puts his head in her lap and she cuts it off.
Solid.
So, like, there was an
solid reaction to that.
So the narrator and her sister Magdalena, sister quote unquote, go to the opera, and they get to the part where Judith cuts off his head and sings this aria about it, and then the narrator's like, This is as good as it gets. Do you want to, like, go see the rest of the city while we're unsupervised and go, like, have a good meal or whatever? And so they go off and they, like, do a blood oath to be, like, not rivals, to protect each other, to be sisters.
Precious moment.
I know, it's really lovely. And then the years start to pass, and it starts to get at Magdalena, and it's heavily implied.
Is this the newcomer?
This is the second wife. It's heavily implied she's bipolar.
Okay.
And whether that's an effect of, like, living forever,
sure,
or being under this guy's thumb, or whatever, she didn't come across as bipolar for the first probably 20 or 30 years they're together, but then she starts getting manic, and then she gets really depressed.
Oh.
And they keep moving, and they're trying to, like, keep her engaged in the world, but, like, he still won't, like, let her go out by herself. He cuts off all of her correspondence with, like she's really into, like, political scheming, and so she, like, as a person, she would keep in contact with all sorts of heads of states, bishops, kings, advisors, and she would, like, give them advice and stuff, and he cuts all of that off.
Big yikes.
I know. They have no lives but each other. He goes out into the world and, like, interacts or whatever, but these women are totally isolated. And then he takes them to Russia right after the Russian Revolution in 1918, and they pick up this really pretty blonde boy and turn him into a vampire.
Sure.
Yeah. And but this guy, he's an actor, and they go off to Paris, and he wants to go act on the stage, and he's very modern and democratically minded, and he wants a say in, like, what cities they move to and, like, what they do in the evening, and Dracula is not having it.
Ooh.
And this kid, Alexei, he doesn't have the sort of, like, defenses that the other women have built up to, like, placate him and, like, keep him from getting too mad and blowing up or whatever. And so, really, the impetus behind finally freeing themselves is, like, to protect their, like, younger brother. I know. And it's just, it's absolutely a story of domestic abuse, but it's also a story of, like, resiliency and camaraderie
and murder
and sex and really pretty prose.
Cool. Shove that one.
I loved it.
It does sound like that falls right in the middle of your I need weird stuff now.
It absolutely, yeah. Like, it was not anything what I was expecting. And part of that was the prose. The prose is so rich and glosses over all of, like, the boring parts. and keeps us interested even when she does mention the boring parts, because, like, she says, like, oh, I think it was, like, another decade, maybe 4. And you're like, what year is it? What century are we in? Should we be expecting electric lights? Like, what plague is this?
That's actually a smart way to get around not nailing down, like, historical details.
Although I have no doubt Vienna was under siege at some point
Sure.
during that approximate time period. But it was just a phenomenally well-written book, and it was weird and interesting, and just...
I'm glad you got your weird book.
Oh my god, I flew through it. Like, it's only like, it's under 250 pages. It's like 230 or something.
Okay.
So it's not a long book. And it's also, like, the formatting is kind of weird, and I don't know if that's because it was a small press, and that was just, like, the cheapest way to do it, or if it's supposed to mimic, like, a journal, where there are no, like, headings or chapters or anything. It's just, like, a scene ends, you turn the page, and then there's no even, like, an indent. It just starts.
Oh.
Yeah. Yeah. So I like to think it was supposed to imitate a journal entry. Sure. But I have no idea. Yeah.
So that's where we ended things last time, and since then I have in fact thrown A Dowry of Blood on my very extensive smack TBR pile.
The murder makes it worth it. You'll enjoy it.
Okay. If you say so. So the last time we talked, you were in the middle of...
Oh my god, the Unnamed
the
Midwife.
book of the Unnamed Midwife, and I think we're all sitting on the edge of our seats to hear how that... Did you DNF?
I
did. You not?
I finished the book of the Unnamed Midwife by Meg Elison. And by the end, I mean, there were a couple of very specific things that convinced me of my new position of, like, I should not have finished that book.
Oh.
It was not worth it.
Okay.
It was so upsetting.
Because I think the last time I talked to you, you were content having finished it. Have we backtracked?
I don't remember the last time we talked about this.
Maybe I'm thinking of something else, but...
Like, it was fine, and it turned out okay, but there are a couple of things that I've decided I disliked the most. One of them is that the way the story is told, I got like 2/3 of the way into the book before I realized that everything isn't a journal entry. And so, like,
But some things are?
Right. So there's this prologue where it's after the Unnamed Midwife has lived her life and passed, and it's her complete book of the Unnamed Midwife. And there are these boys who are learning to be scribes in the quote-unquote new world, post-plague. And so I was led to believe. I thought it meant that everything we were going to read was part of what they were scribing, what they were copying into new books.
Makes sense.
Right. But, like, there's parts that are clearly journal entries because they use a different font, and then there's, like, regular storytelling.
Okay.
And the journal entries are interesting, but they don't cover anywhere near as much of the story. Like, I can't imagine seeing, like, a ton of value in it in that kind of environment. Because if you wanted the story, you had to get the prose in, like, the regular font. But it turns out that's not part of her journal, because around the 2/3 mark, the narrator, who I thought was the Unnamed Midwife, starts telling us...
They aren't?
I know! So the narrator is actually omniscient, and as the midwife...
So it isn't even a character.
It's not even a character. It's...
Oh my god.
So, yeah. So as the midwife, like, meets and leaves these people, somewhere around the halfway to 2/3 mark, the narrator starts telling us how these people live out the rest of their lives. And she never sees them again, so there's no way that she could know how they end their lives.
Oh.
Yeah! And it's all really depressing, of course.
Yikes.
Like...
Hey, this is future Gabi yet again. This time, the in-depth discussion of spoilery plot points from the book of the Unnamed Midwife lasts from about here to the 57-minute mark. So now's your chance to fast forward.
Like, the least depressing one was that this guy and this girl end up living out their days and never seeing any other people ever. Which is, like, they had a really rough time of it, so, like, maybe that's fine, but, like, it's still really sad.
Yeah.
And bad for socialization.
Yes.
And then
Hitting close to home right now.
Yeah. And so, like, you find out what that weird radio
The
broadcast was in one of these, like, this is what happened to so-and-so, where, oh God, there was, like, this quasi-military group in LA broadcasting it to, like, lure women down from Northern California, and then they would enslave them. And if they came down with a guy, then they killed the guy, and yeah, it's horrible. And
I mean, we knew it was going to be horrible, because she
know.
kind of get a sense of...
But, like, the way there's this scene where the woman and the guy that the unnamed midwife had parted ways with, like, the way they got caught by this quasi-military force was just really painful.
Ooh.
And, like, it ends with the narrator going, and so-and-so lived a long time in that prison all by herself, and she never saw another woman ever again.
Sounds really cheerful.
Yeah! And then, oh my God, and then we find out what happened to the unnamed midwife's, like, partner, which just, like, broke me. It was so sad, and sort of, like, gift of the Magi, like, that sort of, like, irony, where, like, they were ships passing in the night, and they never knew it.
Ooh.
And there's this part where, like, somebody asks if she got married. She said no, but that's because we were not getting married out of solidarity with our, like, queer friends, which was, like, really nice, but implies that, like, and not even implies, like, it becomes clear that, like, he wasn't just her boyfriend, like, he was her life partner. And he was a doctor at the hospital where she worked. And he was forcibly evacuated while she was sick, and they just left her. And they knocked him out, put him on a helicopter, and he ended up doing research. And horrible stuff to, like, try to find out more about the virus. Like, women and stillborn children who died, he'd have to, like, dissect them, and it was just, like, so he didn't end well. And the, like, hopeful part of it all is that she finds out where his grave is, and she gets to be like, I want to be buried right next to him.
Oh, yay.
I know! Like, it was just all so sad. And then at the end, it sort of, like, implies that, like, she finds this, like, fort, and she has these great medical skills, and so she joins them, and she, like, finds a place there, and she becomes, like, a leader in the community. But there's this sort of, like, implication by the end of the book that community becomes, like, sort of this, like, militant matriarchal place, which didn't appeal. It just, oh, God.
Doesn't sound like somewhere you want to
I know.
go vacation.
Not even in, like, a post-pandemic world. Not even.
I guess if your options are few on the ground.
I know.
It doesn't sound like there are a lot of great.
Yeah. So, I mean, like, there were so many different things that by the end I was just glad to be done.
So I'm
sure that's when I talked to you. I was just glad to be done.
So the next time you're like...
Moral of the story.
If your instincts are telling you to DNF...
I have DNF'd 2 books since then.
We learned our lesson.
It was a painful lesson, but we did learn it.
I'm so sorry. It sounds like such a rough journey.
It was on 2 different reading lists, though, which was nice.
And now YouTube will know why. Hooray!
I know, it's... So, between, like, the absolute depressingness of it all and the fact that, like, I felt like I couldn't trust the narrator, sort of, because, like...
Really unreliable narrator.
That was just one thing too many.
Yeah.
Actually, her life partner thing, that was what really clinched it.
Sounds...
Like...
It just sounds... I feel like... I mean, this is me especially, but you need some hope and some good things.
And supposedly that was hopeful at the end, where, like, she'd finds out where
she
she's
can
buried.
get buried next to him.
And, like, the community she's part of, there is a baby who survives. Like,
a whole baby.
I know.
Yeah.
But by that
Sounds like
point,
we got born into a great world, too.
I know. It was super cherished, though, because it was the only baby.
The baby's gonna grow up so messed up.
I know. But at that point, like, the narrator zooms out again, and they're like, yep, a whole bunch of people died on this continent, and this continent, and this continent, and this one. Dead people everywhere, stillborn babies everywhere, dead would-be mothers everywhere. But after this one baby was born, a few others were born throughout the world, and nobody knew because all of the communications, the global communications, had fallen into disrepair, and so nobody... Oh god, I just...
You want some more biology for a second?
Sure.
Ever heard of a genetic bottleneck?
Yes.
So, for anyone who doesn't know, a good example of this are the elephant seals, actually, in California.
Really?
If you wipe, and cheetahs. Oh,
Yeah,
cheetahs are a
I knew
bummer.
about.
So if you wipe out enough of a species so that there are only a few left, but then those few bounce back, your gene pool is obviously teeny weeny, which leaves you extremely vulnerable to disease for many generations. Yeah. So, like, the elephant seals have sure bounced back, but, like, you get one bad virus in that mix, and they're all dead.
Yeah.
And
I know cheetahs
are so iffy.
At the end of the Ice Age, there were 7 cheetahs left.
Oof. I heard there was in one of our classes in undergrad, one of our teachers told us that the cheetah situation is so bad that you can skin graft one onto any other, and they'll accept, and the skin graft gets accepted.
That's terrifying.
Mm-hmm.
Oh my god.
Yeah. So, just because a species bounced back from the brink of extinction doesn't mean the ride's over, kids.
Oh my god. So
you're gonna be reading the other two?
No! No! You would literally have to pay me to read those two. I'm sure they're great. It sounds like, I think, from what I can tell by the end of the Unnamed Midwife one, it's the next 2 books are the book of, like, Fern and the book of somebody else and their mother-daughter, which is, like, a big deal in a world where babies aren't born or whatever. But, like, I just... I got the hints of the militancy, and I was just done.
Yeah. Yep.
So done.
So I won't be reading that.
Yeah, don't read that one. Oh god, you would hate that one.
I can tell, Leigh. I sure would.
It is so far from being a Gabi book.
But I ended up loving Burning Roses.
Oh, good.
By S.L. Huang. Yes. So good.
Tell me what you loved. Tell me something wonderful.
So I am, like, historically a sucker for fairy tale retellings.
Right.
Anyway.
As we are.
And obviously Red Riding Hood, from the get-go is involved. Main character's Rosa, and she's Red Riding Hood. Retired Red Riding Hood, kind of.
Middle-aged, retired.
And she has...
Deeply flawed.
She has this terrible, like, abusive ex-friend named is her name Goldilocks? But it's basically Goldilocks.
It's Goldilocks, yeah.
I don't remember her name, but...
And they're friends because Rosa killed the bears for her, right? Yep.
Because Rosa has this whole, like, prejudice thing against people who can turn into animals.
Right.
For whatever reason. And this comes up in characters such as the bears, or, like, are anthropomorphic, too.
Yeah.
So we got these bears, and she comes across this, and this is because the wolf ate her grandmother.
Right.
That's how it starts, this whole, this bigotry.
She, like, sees from a window.
That Goldilocks is, like, cowering in a corner while the bears are pacing
and like, yelling at her and, like...
For invading their home, probably. And then just, like... shoots them
through a window. She's a sharpshooter.
Yep. So that's how their friendship starts, and Goldilocks is, like, obviously a
super manipulative
con artist / Anyway,
terrible
that's a
person.
whole terrible person. But, like, in the present of the story, like, Goldilocks has long been
Yes.
abandoned as the toxic friend that she is.
Right.
And Rose's new friend, Hou-Yi, I didn't realize, obviously, until... Well, so I remember last time we were talking, and I couldn't remember Hou-Yi's name at first. And I was like, I know it's Rosa and Hou-Yi, I guess.
Yeah.
And then, early on in the book, Hou-Yi makes a joke about her wife being on the moon. Did not make the connection at that point. And then, like, halfway through, finally names her wife, who is for real on the moon. And her name's Chang'e. And I was like... This is the Chinese myth of Chang'e and Hou-Yi. Like, how did I not recognize Hou-Yi? Because I do know this story. And recently watched, not recently anymore, but at the time had recently seen Over the Moon, which also involves, do you know this story?
I don't know if I know Over the Moon.
So but do you know the story of Hou-Yi?
I did not. I read Burning Roses and I did not make that connection.
So I've heard a few different versions of it at this point, but the like a version of it is in Once Upon a Time. They're in Chinese mythology. There were 10 sons, and they usually go in order, like one
Right.
and then the other and the other. One day they all decided they wanted to hang out at the same time and started, burning humanity to death. And Hou-Yi is this legendary archer who came along and started shooting the suns out of the sky and then got to the last one, and some deity or the emperor, whoever.
I thought you meant, like, sons, like,
oh, no.
brothers.
No. Although
Okay.
I think in some versions of the legend they are someone's sons.
Right.
And their sons.
Okay.
But no.
Stars in the sky.
Stars in the sky,
Okay.
burning humanity, too many suns are not a good thing. So someone has Hou-Yi shoot them down, and Hou-Yi gets the last one. Someone's like, can you maybe chill a bit? Leave one. I think one is a good number of suns to have in the sky.
Since that's what we've all got left, anyway.
So that's one of, like, Hou-Yi's big accomplishments, and I guess he traditionally has, like, a lot of other, like, huge, like kind of like Hercules, like, has these other animals and things that, he conquers and whatever. And then his wife is Chang'e, and various versions of how he gets his hands on this immortality pill or potion, depending on the version. And in one story, if you drink it all, you'll, like, immediately ascend to the heavens as a deity. And if you have half and half, like, if you only have half, you gain immortality, like, kind of a halfway through. So he and his wife, like, opted for mortality or got forced to be mortals for some reason or whatever. So this was how do we get back to being immortals?
Okay.
And so he was like, yes, I'll split the potion with my wife and we're good. And in some, like, more misogynistic versions of this, the wife, like, investigates the potion on the like, just wants to, like, see what this is about, and just, like, downs the whole thing, which is how she becomes the goddess on the moon. And then in other versions, which is clearly the version, like, Burning Roses kind of integrated, there's another character whose name completely escapes me, who is after this potion, and to keep him from getting it, Chang'e downs it before, and then again ascends to the moon.
Yeah.
And in Burning Roses, that's, like, Hou-Yi's prodigy. Yeah. They're, like, kind of adopted.
Like, adoptive son.
And there's a weird, like, tension there, and misunderstandings abound, and it caused
so many misunderstandings.
But anyway.
In so much misery.
So much misery! But they all worked out. Anyway, so I got really excited because that was a whole other fairy tale I hadn't realized, because I was obviously on the eye out for the Western ones.
Right.
It didn't even occur to me that there would be a non-Western one that I would even recognize, so I got excited about that. And then, and it was, they have a lot of misery in their backgrounds, but the stories about, like, overcoming that and becoming better people and learning to get past, like, the worst of yourself to become better and, like, fix what you can, and I just like happy things like that, where you just, like, people learning to be better and just being better, and And it was such a hopeful ending, and
Yeah, it was a really good ending.
so good. So I guess it's out of print now. I tried to pick it up.
You can still get the ebook.
You can still get the ebook. I'm sure. I actually haven't looked into that, but I keep hoping the paperback will come out. So, because it's been a year since the hardback came out. So if they're going to, it would have to be like any minute, but I don't.
Was it a Tor.com book?
I don't know.
I thought it was, but I didn't.
I got it from the library, so I don't.
Yeah, I got mine as an ebook.
So, how did we want to do this? Has been Infinite TBR, hoping that you and your wives successfully murder your evil vampiric abusive husband.